For being the EVO champion character piloted by FlyQuest's Nitro, it's pretty surprising to see that Jacko has a relatively short change list compared to the rest of the cast. Still, there are a few things to note in here that are going to impact her gameplay, so we're going to go ahead and explore those very quickly. Like most of the cast, her defense modifier value has been decreased, thus meaning she takes less damage. Previously, the sequence did 114 damage. Now it does 108 damage. However, Jacko also sees a nerf to her overall defense due to adjustments to her risk. They've decreased her risk defense and made her risk level charge more when she's blocking. The value is supposed to now be the same for characters like Testament and Asuka. In the previous patch, we built about enough of a risk gauge to get to the R on that sequence of moves. And additionally, after a sequence like that, she would take 133 damage, so an increase of 19 damage from the base values of this previous sequence. Let's take a look at her risk gauge in the current patch. The same sequence that used to stop at the R in burst now goes all the way to the S. Additionally, after blocking this sequence, she takes an extra 20 damage as opposed to 19. It's a small increase of the damage she's taking when she has her risk gauge cranked, but it should mean that when she's on the defensive, she is going to have less effective health overall than her previous version. Jacko's 6B, like many others, now has increased recovery. We'll go ahead and compare the two versions now. All things considered, it feels very marginal in terms of how much recovery it now has, but I feel like the 6B already had a little slower recovery, and they're just making sure it's falling in line with the rest of the cast. There's another change too. The hurt box will no longer expand until the active frames are over, so Jacko should be hit out of this a little less often than she was before. Crouching Heavy Slash now does more damage. Previously, it would do 30. Now it does 41, an increase of 11. Jacko will appreciate this since she can use this as a launcher in some of her combo routes, but this is the only normal of hers that sees this kind of buff, so really it's fairly negligible overall, especially in a version of the game where the entire rest of the cast, or at least most of them I should say, are taking less damage. Jacko's sweep now has more horizontal blowback, meaning it's harder for her to convert from this at maximum range. In the previous patch, it was fairly common for her to use Servant Shoot as a means to pick a combo up here, especially if she had some meter with it. This made it a little more versatile as a poke. With the increased horizontal blowback, this particular link at maximum range is harder for her to use. So it's a slight nerf overall, but when you're at closer ranges with Sweep, you should find that most of your combos work fine. Arc System Works also stated that it's harder for her to get follow-ups on counter hit, but again, if you're close enough with this move, you should still be able to get most pickups fine. It's a very negligible nerf overall for Jacko, but one that I think that advanced Jacko players who are used to using the maximum range of this normal are certainly going to feel the most. The change to the horizontal blowback on 2D will also mean that some of Jacko's Okizeme setups using this are going to need some slight adjustments. It's still very much possible to put the opponent into a hard knockdown vortex, but your ranges and timings might have to vary a little bit. Here's 200D Witch pointing some things out. Again, it seems like most of the character's game plan remains intact despite this change to horizontal blowback on it 2D. I simply wanted to point this out in case anybody wanted to ask the question, but what about Hiroki? Jacko can now cancel all versions of her Servant Shoot into a dash when she comes in contact with the servant. As you might imagine, this has a lot of implications for Jacko's pressure game as well as potential combo routing, which we're going to explore with some Twitter clips. Caleb is going to demonstrate an example of how this new dash cancel opens up opportunities for Jacko to pick up conversions off of kicking the servant in neutral. Pretty cool. It's also pretty useful for making sure that some conversions are able to remain intact, like the attempt of Arc System Works to nerf for counter hit 2D conversions. Pretty saucy stuff again. And again, there's some potential here for exploring with new pressure sequences that she gets since she's able to dash cancel out of hitting the servant. Seems like a pretty nightmarishly long scenario. I'm sure that there's various changes as well to Jacko that players will take some time to lab and figure out. As always, whenever you mess with a character that has a lot of intricate things going on in their kit, initially people might look at what the character has lost and start to bemoan nerfs, but pretty soon people are able to do some deeper labbing and find out new ways of performing the same actions or finding new tools that they didn't have before. Arc System Works has mentioned they are aware of a bug where Jacko is able to dash cancel servant shoot in situations where she shouldn't be able to. So, if you see this unintended behavior, don't worry. It's going to be patched out within the month of November. Jacko receives a handful of buffs and nerfs here. The nerfs are overall fairly small, namely targeting her identity as a character and making her a little more squishy when she gets on defense, which I think is appropriate for a character who has such overwhelming offense potential once she gets her setups going. There's going to be a lot of things underneath the hood of Jacko's game plan that are going to be adjusted. People have already been bemoaning the lack of some of her setups that existed before due to the change of sweep, but there's already been some other people that are finding new ways of doing the same thing and making those adjustments. As is usual with a character like this, you change one little thing, and because of all the different interactions within their kit, it might feel like that there's going to be a lot of things that are missing, but if you give the player base some time, they are going to find these things. I think she's going to be pretty strong in this version, just as she was in the last version, and in the hands of the right players, she should still be able to perform some incredible tournament runs overall. We'll see how she gets along, but I think that there's plenty of potential for her, given the fact that she has new opportunities to confirm from pokes, as well as some new pressure sequences that are able to push the opponent completely across the screen.